Welcome back to Read and Rot, where we settle in with stories that linger long after they're over. Most episodes, we dive into fictional horror, creepypastas, urban legends, and tales designed to keep you awake at night. But every so often, reality reminds us that it can be far more frightening than fiction. Tonight's story is one of survival. It's the story of Alison Botha, a young woman whose strength in the face of unimaginable violence carried her through what should have been impossible. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's story. Before we begin, I want to give a quick content warning. This episode discusses a real criminal case involving kidnapping, attempted murder, and severe violence. These events are real and may be upsetting to some viewers. Please take care of yourself while listening. And if this isn't the right story for you today, that's completely okay. Now for tonight's rot tip. If someone you care about is traveling alone, working late, or heading home at night, don't underestimate the value of checking in with each other. A quick text saying you've arrived safely, sharing your location with someone you trust, or letting someone know your plans can provide peace of mind. It's a small habit that helps people look out for one another. Take care of yourself and your fellow rotters. Now on to the story. Alison Botha, born on September 22nd, 1967, in Port Elizabeth. She led a normal, successful early life, marked by her role as the head girl at the Collegiate High School for Girls. She spent her young adult life traveling for a few years after finishing school, then finally returning to South Africa to settle into her career as an insurance broker in her hometown. At this point in time, I would like to remind you that this story is graphic, and to please make sure you are in the proper mental state to continue listening. Sunday, December 18th, 1994, Alison had spent the day at the beach with her friends. Since she lives in South Africa, their summers happen in December while we're having our winters. Nonetheless, Alison was enjoying her summer with friends, and after having dinner at her place, she drove one of them home before making her way back so she could get some rest and start her work week the next day. As Alison was grabbing her things out of her car, a man by the name of Frans Duteau appeared out of the shadows, forced himself into the car, and shoved her into the passenger seat. Before Alison was able to process what had just happened, Duteau pressed a knife against her neck and told her that if she moved, he would kill her. Minutes later, Duteau's accomplice, Thuns Kruger, got into the back seat of Alison's car, and they forced her into the driver's seat. As she was made to drive further and further away from her apartment, fear began to set in. She knew something sinister awaited because, on the way to wherever they were headed, the men told her exactly what they were going to do. The men took Alison to a secluded area just outside of the city, a desolate dirt road where there was no sign of life or safety. They dragged Alison out of the car and onto that very road. Duteau and Kruger told Alison they were going to have sex with her, and asked if she was going to fight them. Clearly trapped and terrified for her life, Alison said no, in hopes that if she just endured all of this, they might let her go. The two men, who had a history of violence against women, sexually assaulted her, and they were determined to kill her. At first, they tried to strangle her. Even though Alison lost consciousness, she still clung to life. After realizing that she was alive, Duteau told Kruger coldly that Alison had to die. That's when Duteau took out his knife and started slashing at Alison's throat, with so much force that her windpipe and trachea were severed. Filled with unimaginable pain, all Alison could do was lie there and struggle for breath. But Duteau and Kruger's brutality wasn't finished. They proceeded to repeatedly stab Alison in the abdomen, 36 times to be exact, completely disemboweling her in the process. All while Alison was still fully conscious. At some point, she recalls she couldn't feel any pain anymore. likely due to the adrenaline and shock. After all was said and done, the men stepped back to admire their work, asking each other, "Do you think she's dead?" One of them replying, "No one can survive that." They then discarded Allison's clothes from her car beside her in the dirt, and they drove off in her car. Little did they know, Allison was still breathing. Her injuries were catastrophic, to say the least. She laid on the ground looking up at the sky, fading in and out of consciousness. She recalls hearing a whistling or a wheezing noise, but little did she know at the time that they had caused so much damage to her neck and throat that the sound was her severed windpipe moving as she took breaths. Due to the wounds to her abdomen, her intestines were outside of her body. After some time, Allison realized that if she didn't survive, she needed to leave behind something that could identify the men responsible. Lifting her arm, she wrote the names of her attackers in the sand beside her, and underneath them wrote, "I love Mom." It was at this time that Allison remembered the men had discarded her clothes nearby. She reached over and grabbed some of them, wrapping them around her abdomen to help keep her organs in place. As she tried to get onto her knees to crawl, her vision faded in and out. When Allison reached up to touch her head, she was met with nothing. Just her throat. Her head had fallen backwards and was only being held barely in place. She had to manually support her head with one hand while holding her organs with the other as she crawled towards what she hoped was safety. After what must have felt like an eternity of crawling, collapsing, and forcing herself back up, Allison finally reached the white line at the edge of the road. Thankfully, she didn't have to wait long. A car full of students came driving by and slammed on the brakes when they saw Allison lying on the side of the road. A young veterinarian student by the name of Tien Ellard jumped out of the car, horrified by what he had saw, and rushed to her aid. For the first time that night, Allison was no longer alone. Tien tried to keep her awake by asking yes or no questions and telling her to squeeze his hand in response, making sure she stayed alert and conscious. The people with Tien called for help, but first responders took over an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. Upon arriving to the hospital, doctors were stunned by the severity of her injuries. One doctor later said that in his 16 years of practicing medicine, he had never seen injuries so severe. Allison underwent multiple extensive surgeries to repair her throat and abdomen. Her survival continues to astonish doctors and investigators alike. After everything she endured, she spent weeks and eventually months in the hospital recovering from her physical injuries, the trauma, and everything in between. Despite everything, Allison's resilience and determination to survive and to seek justice for what Duteau and Kruger had done to her only grew stronger. Because she survived, she was able to give the police everything they needed to identify the two men. She knew what they looked like, what they sounded like, and even their names. With overwhelming evidence and Allison's testimony, both men were convicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping, sexual assault, attempted murder, and assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. Unfortunately, the story didn't end there. Recently, in 2023, after serving 29 years, both men were released on parole without Allison being properly informed or consulted. However, in February 2025, both of their paroles were revoked and they were returned to prison. After making her miraculous recovery and seeing her attackers brought to justice, Allison still had to live with both the physical and emotional scars of that night. She chose to heal by facing the reality of what had happened. Soon after, she began traveling the world, speaking in 35 countries and sharing her story. She became one of the first women in South Africa to speak publicly about sexual assault both in her home country and abroad. In doing so, she has helped countless other survivors come forward and share their own stories. Alison wrote a book about her life and her experience, and in 2016, a documentary about her story was released for those who wish to learn more. And that's the story of Alison Botha. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Read and Rot. Alison Botha's story is difficult to hear, but is also one of extraordinary resilience. Through everything she endured, she refused to let that night define the rest of her life. And I hope that's the part of her story that stays with you. If you found today's episode meaningful, I really appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe. It helps this little corner of the internet grow. If there are any stories you'd like to see covered in a future episode, let me know down in the comments. Until next time, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and as always, rot responsibly.